it's kind of funny, I feel like I'm kind of reinventing myself. And not that I think that that's where I fit, but a lot of other companies have kind of brought me on as a subcontractor to do their server work and some of that stuff. And and right now I'm willing to pretty much work
That's right.
around the clock to get it done. So I've been doing a lot of extra stuff for people, and it's kind of been a good thing. It's filled my calendar and kept me busy, and it's I still don't think it's what I want to do long term. I
Right.
really want to build the business for myself and have my direct customers that I'm supporting, but I think the people that I'm working with know that I'm trustworthy. I'm not going to steal their clients. That's not what I'm looking for. Ultimately, I'm a resource to help, and and I'm willing to help. I've got experience. I've done this. So I've been doing a lot of that, and it's been interesting. I mean, it's like every week it seems like I'm working for someone else, and so I mean, literally the past 3 weeks I've worked for three different people, and just on 3-4 day projects each week for a company, and so it's been interesting.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of From the Trenches, a Bering McKinley Vision podcast series. We're joined again by our friend Chris down in Florida. We last spoke to Chris about 90 days ago, as Chris is going through his journey of firing up his own MSP and, has this really big goal to be a real huge presence in Florida. We're Chris, 90 days in, or are you probably a little further than that in the journey? I know I didn't talk to you on day 0, but how long into it are you now?
Yeah, we're really just over 90 days.
Just over 90 days. Okay. So we're 90 days in. Um, that first, year can be its own challenge and struggle, or it can be amazing. It can be anything in between. Tell us about, the last 90 days for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's been tough. It's definitely been harder than I expected to, leave a day job and start, a new MSP. Um, Basically, at this point, I've landed my first customer. I just landed them in the last month, so I'm actually going through the onboarding process right now. And I had expected at this point to have multiple customers, and so obviously, the market has been kind of tough. It's been hard to find new business. And I think from my perspective, it's been the challenge, partly, we're in the holiday season and things, while some people are busier during that time, it's harder to find new business, I feel like, during that time. But one of the things that I'm struggling with is that in my past role, I was used to working with bigger accounts and things like that, and now starting out and starting over, I'm being told by some of these bigger accounts that I've worked with that oh well, you're too small, we don't think you can handle it, those kind of things. And so I'm finding as a new MSP, it's very hard, even though there's outsourced help desks and all these things today, it's very hard to make yourself seem big enough, to handle certain clients, even though I'm, completely confident I could handle them. But, it's just their perspective looking in going, oh, well, you've only got two people in your organization. How on earth could you handle something our size? And so that's one of the challenges I've been kind of trying to wrap my head around, what's the best way to do that? And like I said, I mean, I know there's outsource help desks and there's all these other things, but the challenge is that, a lot of times you lose the, personal touch and the quality of service when you outsource those things.
Yeah,
So,
that's an interesting one. The organizations that say, "Hey, you're just not quite big enough. We're not really confident you can do it." What size organizations are we hearing say something like that?
probably closer to the 75 user range. I've got one I'm talking to that I think we're going to move forward with. They're closer to the 200 user range. And I've, in my past role, supported companies up to 300, 350, no worries. So I'm used to those type of environments, and obviously, in my past role, I had a team of people that I worked with, but ultimately, a lot of it came back to me, and I was handling a lot of stuff for these clients, especially the direction of where they're going and that kind of thing. So it's definitely been a little bit of a challenge, having to find new business and having to work through that. But I think now that that first client's there, I think things are starting to roll in the right direction. Luckily for me, I've been doing a lot of subcontract work for other providers, server work and camera installations and project management type stuff. And so that's kept me busy. And luckily, my bills are paid but I can tell you that it's been tough. I mean, there's been weeks where it's like, man, I don't know where the money's going to come from this week, and then a project will fall in my lap, and I'm super thankful for that, and I just hope it keeps going.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on a 75 user, 200 user, what kind of services would you be looking to offer? Would that be more of a co-managed, or would you be looking to be their sole IT provider?
Yeah, so typically their sole IT provider. I mean, if they've got an internal resource, we will do co-managed services. But in a lot of cases, at that 75 mark, I'm not seeing people are either starting to look at that or, they haven't quite got there yet.
I see. So what would you be charging for, a 100 plus or 75, user plus organization?
Yeah, so typically I find, and I know this probably is not ideal, but a lot of times just I've not been successful at selling at full price for a large organization. And I know, I've heard a lot of different consultants and things say, don't cut your price. So I get all that, but in the real world, I haven't seen that be true in most cases. So I'm usually going to be about 85 to 100 per user. Now, usually I don't include on-site support with that. That would be kind of the only thing that's not included, but otherwise, help desk services, all monitoring and remediation, that kind of stuff is all included.
Yeah, interesting. I hear you when you say, you hear people say, don't drop your prices. And then your experience is it's been really hard to go full freight on that. Um, Let me ask you a little bit about your own personal sales background because you're out there now. You are having to generate leads and actually go through the process to close a deal. What's been some of your background in that?
So I've always been more of, I guess I could say, and this isn't like an arrogant thing, more of the closer, and what I mean by that is I'm probably not the guy that starts the conversation. Probably not the one that's going to do all the small talk and, tell them how great we are. I'm having to learn to do that, and, I'm starting to do more of that. But in my past role, it was more of we had salespeople that would go out, they would find the leads, they would have those initial conversations, and then they would bring me in to talk more about the technical aspect and how we're going to solve their problems and how our team can do that kind of thing. And that's where I feel like my strengths were. And so, I have a gentleman that's kind of helping me out, from a sales perspective, and he started having those initial conversations. And I think that's really helping, just because I think that's, probably my weakness. And so, as business grows, things change, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're making adjustments. Just kind of have him on kind of a commission basis right now. So anything that, he brings in and, does the initial conversation, then, he'll get paid a commission if it closes.
Interesting.
And
Yeah, it's what you said about I'm not really great at the small talk, telling them how great we are. I'm good at closing, getting that, confidence from the buyer around the technical aptitude and getting that thing over the finish line. Uh, Good news is that's what every single MSP owner in the history of time says. So you're right in there, which is good. There technical people in sales can sometimes make the mistake of thinking, "Oh, I'm good at this," because in their current MSP, they're the guy that gets brought in to quote unquote close it. When really, in fact, you're not closing it. What you're doing is validating their decision by bringing the technical piece to it. Now, and so there's this kind of like, there's this reality check that happens, 3, 6 months in to say, oh shit, okay, this is different than what I thought. Now, what I would say is that thing about, telling the salespeople how great we are, telling the client or the prospect how great we are, and all the small talk. It's really funny to hear you say that, because that is what non salespeople define sales as, right? It's just like this kind of bullshit, whatever type stuff. When really, in fact, and I'll just share this with you, um, if you kind of think about the order of selling, have you ever heard that phrase before, the order of selling? So it's really there's three things in the order. Number one is you sell yourself. Number two, we sell our company. And number three, we sell our goods and services. And when you have all the expertise you do, you're really comfortable selling the service. This is what we do. This is how we do it. This is, this is your problem. This is what we can solve your problem. When really you can go on this journey to say, well, what does it mean to sell myself? And it turns out that selling yourself isn't about you talking about yourself at all. Have you heard this before?
Yeah, I have heard some of it. Yep.
Yeah, and my favorite sales author or guru is a guy named Steven Schiffman, and he talks a lot about this. His whole concept is ask questions, get sales, and asking these meaningful rapport building questions. Not, do you like golf? I like golf. Where do you golf? I golf here. That there's a place for that, but that's not that interesting. It's really this series of questions around what do you do? How do you do it? Why do you do it that way? How can we help you do what you do better? And you never have to kind of tell them how great you are. They just know it by your curiosity about them and the thoughtful questions you're asking. So that could be a pretty interesting, journey for you to go on. Maybe pick up a copy of that book, because that is you run the same risk as every owner of, about to go on this 20-year journey, and I'm going to say, if someone else just brings me to the table, I can close it. Okay, that's cool. All right, that's what most owners do. Or you can go down this journey to say, I'm going to learn how to be an awesome salesperson. I'm going to put a lot of energy into that craft and, show it the respect it deserves and work on it. That's a decision you'll make at some point, because
Right.
it's what makes the whole thing go around. You can do the work. You can serve the 75, the 200. But if you're just sitting there saying, huh, I guess I'll wait till somebody brings me something, or, there's some side work I can do. It's a long 20 years. You'll get there, but it's a long 20 years.
Yeah. Well, and I am definitely doing all those things as well. I'm in like a leads group that I go to weekly, and I've visited a couple BNI chapters, that kind of thing. So I'm doing those things as well. You got to do the 1 minute pitches and that kind of thing. So I'm doing all that. It just, like I said, it's there hasn't been a lot of leads come through, and so that's been part of the challenge. And so it's more, I feel like, kind of who and that kind of thing. But for me, it's tough because I'm kind of starting in a newer market. So, it's I don't have that. I don't have that history of people. I'm starting brand new, and that's part of, I feel like, the challenge. And so right now I'm just getting out trying to meet people in the market. I'm going to, the events in that market, on the weekends, bringing my family, that kind of thing, trying to make sure that I'm seen in the marketplace, and bump into people I know, the few people I do know, and ask them for other recommendations. And so I've been doing those things as well, and I definitely am trying to improve on the sales side and things like that, and I think it'll come. It just, I feel like, part of it's personality, the other part of it is, I've kind of been in this support role for so long that I've just kind of, I think, like most people, kind of gotten to a point of, not that I dislike people or anything like that, because I love serving people. That's part of why I'm in this business. But I feel like, I tend to lean to the technology side, and I'm just like, oh, I can fix that. And so it's a lot of times I'm short, and I'm not like thinking through, you know, the conversational piece. I'm just saying, oh yeah, I can fix that problem. Here's how we're gonna do it. And so that's where I think, at least initially, I think, it helps for me to have someone else to help, build that conversation, do that initial, like, hey, because I'm not great at talking about, the things we can do in most cases. And, I do ask a lot of questions, but what I find is a lot of times the customers go, I don't know. I don't know where it is. I don't know how it gets there. It's stored somewhere. It might be in our IT guy's closet, and so those are questions that, you have to kind of keep asking and keep filling out. But, you know, that's definitely something I think, always can improve on for sure.
Yeah. I think of there's so much you're doing that I'm liking, finding that person who can go out and do some prospecting for you. Um so you found this person, they're willing to go out and just get paid if something closes, is that right?
Hmm. Yep.
Okay. And and did they bring this opportunity to you, the one that you lost, and then also the one that might actually go somewhere? Or the one
No,
that you got?
yeah, the one I lost, no. The one I got, no. But the next one that's gonna potentially looks like it's gonna move forward, yes, they brought this one in.
Great, great. And then does this person have some other means of supporting themselves as well?
Hmm. Yep, yep. They're working a full-time job and doing this kind of thing on the side, and take vacation days, that kind of thing, to help out from time to time.
Yeah, that could be interesting to kind of crowdsource it a little bit to say, well, let me make an army of those folks. Let
Hmm.
me figure out how to put together kind of a channel program that, keeps lots of people out there looking, on my behalf.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that as well. Some of the past contacts that I have at, different, internet service providers, things like that. I've kind of pitched them like, hey, if there's any kind of lead you can throw me, I'll, pass you something on the back end kind of thing. And so I think that'll help long term, but it just, like I said, I feel like, starting out, it's tough, right? People don't know you have to build all that, and it's just it takes time. And I guess I thought it would take, I thought it'd be faster than this, and it's really not.
So what did you think would make it be faster, and what are you finding why it's not faster?
Well, I think leads, I think the market, I'm gonna say, is pretty saturated. There's plenty of providers out there. I think customers are putting up with a little more stuff than they used to. I don't know if that's because they just don't want to make the change. I mean, I've been told by a couple people that, they're just too busy, that they really can't make this change right now. I've got two accounts actually that one was looked like it was going to go forward, and at the last minute they were like, look, we just really can't do this right now. Let's revisit after the first of the year. The second one, same kind of thing. They said, too busy right now, but let's revisit in the future. So I've got tons of those that are like, hey, got to follow up in, 90 days or whatever. But not not just landing a bunch of people going, yeah, I'm here, let's do it, let's change something. Um, so I think some of it's people are putting up, customers are putting up with, more. I've heard, and I talked to some of these customers and they tell me like, oh, it took, I mean, I'll tell you one of them, they said that their current company took almost a year to get a remote access issue resolved. And I was like, well, what did you do for that year? And they said, we literally either just had to drive into the office or we just couldn't do it, you know? And, you know, I mean, these days there's so many tools, that even temporarily, I mean, you could stand up something within 15, 20 minutes and get them, working in a gap. So, really shocked to hear that, they've dealt with something that long and, had to go through that pain. But when it all came down to it, they were like, yeah, but we've been with this provider for almost 20 years and, we're going to give them another chance and we're just too busy right now to have any interruption.
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
So, that's real. I think, one of the ideas that got presented to me in the last few months by someone else, and I think they're onto something, is we've got a supply and demand issue in the MSP world. Way oversupplied and, not as much demand to meet that supply, right? Because as we see, a guy can quit his job and, be an MSP overnight. So, and now you're banging on doors and someone else is banging on doors and everyone's out there trying to get everyone where everyone kind of already has some IT solution that they need, right?
Mhm.
So, one of the wedges, and it's not really technically a wedge, but one of the things that we've seen be really successful, especially for the startup guy, is coming in and saying, do you have an MSP? Yes. Uh, Great. I only work with companies with MSPs. My whole business is in assessing. So I'm going to charge you a small assessment. Or I'm going to charge you an assessment fee. It doesn't have to be small. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to look at these, 35 areas, and I'm going to give you a report. Our transaction is done. Is that worth your time? And then you can have the conversation. Like, I've worked at an MSP. I know where they're awesome. I know where they're lacking. And I know that so many times our clients would have benefited from something like this, an outside person coming in and saying, just neutrally, here's what you have. And then, that's the transaction. And if you can get some of those, now you're talking about something that they don't have to participate much in, something that's a reasonable price. Maybe it's $2,000, something like that. To say, let me just get those transactions going. It's a very simple call to make to a stranger. You got an MSP? I'm in the business of assessing. Is that something we should have a conversation about? No, go fuck yourself. All right, bye. I'll call the next person. Have you considered things like that? Have you seen things like that?
I have not seen it in the market, but I have considered it. I'm actually working with a pretty large Catholic diocese right now that we're kind of planning everything for January to kind of do that, right? So they have basically, I think it's 102, individual churches in their diocese, and they all have different MSPs right now, and they've asked me to, could I come in and kind of audit them individually and let them know, who's doing well, who needs improvement, and what options there are. So yeah, so I'm working on that kind of deal right now. It's the first one I've done of that type. Usually, that's not what I'm going after, but I agree with you. I feel like often it's harder to make the sale of that, because there's been in the past so many companies that would do free assessments, but like in this particular case, they were looking for that. They're like, hey, we need someone to audit this. We're not looking necessarily to replace them right now. We just need kind of a similar audit across the board for all of them so that we know, who's doing well, who needs improvement, and, who's getting ripped off and we need to change them immediately. So, so that's going to keep me busy. I just got to get through to that. It doesn't start, we're looking at a start date of January for that project. So,
Yeah, no, I really love when I've seen that. Is a lot of times it's just a, hey, if they're awesome, I'm going to tell you they're awesome. If they're not awesome, I'm going to tell you where they're not awesome. And you can take that back to your MSP and say, hey, here's what we saw. Tell us what you think about what this outside person said. And if you can kind of position where you're not making them wrong. Oh, look, you have a crappy MSP. You made a bad decision. You've been putting up with this. You're weak. As long as we don't position it like that and just say, hey, this is a valuable thing for you to manage a relationship. Which reminds me, Chris, part of your business was kind of that virtual CIO, if I recall.
yes, yep, yep. I offer fractional CTO services.
Fractional
So,
CTO, that's right.
mhm.
Boy, I love that. Have and I think the last time we spoke, if I'm recalling, you weren't as excited about that side of the business, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't say not as excited. I think it's such a newer style offering that customers don't understand where you come in. And that's what, I've been over the last few months also trying to figure out like what's the play on that, because kind of like the IT side, right? You call someone up and they've already got someone and they're like, well, wouldn't they handle that? They don't understand, and and calling someone up and telling them I'm going to charge you $2,000 for an audit, they're like, why do I need that? So you have to kind of, get them to a point where they've had a problem or they're currently experiencing something and they feel like there was maybe something missed, or they're just not technical, and their IT guys tell them all this technical stuff and they're like, I don't know what he said. That happens a lot as well. So I wouldn't say it wasn't that I'm not as excited. I think from my perspective, coming from an MSP environment for the last 18 years, I felt like and thought that that was going to be the thing that I could jump right back into. You know, it was going to be, I don't want to say easy, but easier than, and I would continue to do the fractional CTO stuff as well, and just, where those jobs fit, that'd be great. And otherwise I'd have the MSP stuff to keep me going. Um, but it's been a tough market. I mean, I market, I do email, we've done mailers, we've done a number of things, picking up the phone call, we've done some, ride days, we'll go out and, try to walk in businesses. And it just, a lot of them are like, oh, decisions are made elsewhere. Oh, we just got bought by so and so, we have corporate, all these things. And so it's like trying to find that it's to me, it's become more of a niche these days, right? Like used to, it was like almost everybody was, or at least in Florida, almost everybody was this like 10 to, 50 user environment and they all needed IT service. And now it's like you got all these companies buying up all these little companies. And so now it's like, well, they don't need it. We have IT out of this place or whatever. I mean, I literally, I was at a chamber event about a month ago. I was talking to a funeral director at a funeral home, and I was like, "Oh, well, what do you do for IT?" And he goes, "Well, actually, we got bought by a larger, and I don't remember the name, but they were one of the largest in the U.S." And he said, "So they have a help desk and everything." And I said, "Well, how about local support?" And he says, "Oh, they just hire somebody when needed." And, I even kind of threw in there like, well, it's not ideal, but I'd love to be the local support if that could be an option. And same thing, they're like, nah, they just kind of get whoever they can grab each time. It's always someone different. And I said, but wouldn't it be beneficial to have the same guy that could come, on the regular? And he just, he's like, well, I'm sorry, I don't make that decision. And so, I think that's another challenge is just the marketplace has kind of changed or is changing. I mean, I've seen more acquisitions of things in the last, few years than probably ever in my lifetime. And, and I hear small businesses buying other small businesses. I hear, big companies buying small businesses. So I think, and I see, I watch, I'm in all these Facebook MSP groups and things like that. And I watch guys in there go, oh, I've never lost a customer before until now. They got bought by somebody. And so I think, I won't say I was in the same boat because I think we've all lost business over time, especially with 18 years in the business. But one of the things I have noticed is more over the last, 3 to 5 years, more of the businesses that we lost were because of acquisition or going out of business in some cases, retirement with no one to take over.
Yeah, there's no doubt your observation is spot on. There's just so much acquisition going on out there, and that's we've got a buddy who does nothing but dental. And I think he's got somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 dental clinics, and he's been doing that for 25 years. And he's like, yeah, our biggest threat is PE companies coming in buying all of our clients, and so we maybe lose 100 a year and get 105 and get another 105. So he's got this massive sales machine just to keep up with the churn, which
Yep,
is really really a crazy world. Oh
for
yeah,
sure.
man. Well, I think this is interesting. I think you've got that opportunity to really kind of figure out, am I going to go into a very specific vertical? Am I going to kind of tackle an area of technology that is underserved out there? Am I going to offer that executive service that is, it's new to prospects, but I can really show the value in there? I think the most challenging thing you can do is be that generalist. I think because now you're just like every other MSP.
Hmm.
And all the things that you observe about people are willing to put up with subpar service and whatnot, statistically, that's exactly who you'll be when you're $2 million. Statistically, right? There's so many MSPs and so many of them have their own challenges, and new guy can come in and say, "Oh, see, look, they didn't get that thing fixed, and oh, they suck. I would have done that better." When you're 500,000 or 200,000, boy, it's pretty easy to be pretty amazing. Gets pretty hard as you get bigger.
Right.
Oh yeah, you've
That is
got
true.
some cool opportunities in front of you, and I like how you're getting after it. So, how many hours a week do you reckon you're kind of putting towards sales and marketing efforts?
Well, I mean, and I guess it depends on the week, that's the beauty of the entrepreneur, right? You have to kind of go where you're needed. Um, I would say normally, I'm at least 10 hours a week. Um, these last couple of weeks I've been doing subcontract work and I've been booked like every single day. So I really haven't had a chance. I mean, I'd come home and send a couple emails at night, but it was literally, just a few kind of thing. I mean, I use a CRM, I do have regular like I do biweekly emails, so basically I have a CRM. I have 19,000 contacts in there. And basically there's, as I add contacts, there's an initial kind of, it's over like a 3 week period. It sends about 8 emails just kind of saying who we are, what services we offer, and maybe some of the high touch points of like, is wireless slowing you down, or are you experiencing internet issues? Here's how we might solve that. Just some high level things that might resonate with the end user. And we're targeting, CEOs, presidents, office managers, COOs, pretty much all the people that might be a decision maker in those businesses. So we do that, and then once they come off of that, we do a biweekly, just kind of month, newsletter type thing. It and different things come from that. We talk about AI. We do talk about auditing, that kind of thing. I'd basically, pull those every other. Well, I do them once a month, and I usually do them about 3 weeks out. So there's always some kind of content going out. You know, but I mean, there's not, and I get tons of people that reply, but it doesn't seem like they go anywhere. A lot of people are, hey, I'll keep your name for the future. Don't have a need right now, but I'll let you know if I do, that kind of thing. I'm also doing LinkedIn outreach, so that's kind of, I don't want to say, well, I guess it is automated. I'm using a software tool that, basically I'd give it the people to go look for with a search, and then I give it the messaging, and it goes out and it sends the initial messages. I am getting quite a bit of response on that, but same kind of thing. A lot of it is, oh, I just retired, or actually I'm looking for a job, and so they've got the old, office manager title or whatever on LinkedIn, but they're unemployed currently. So I'm getting a lot of that, which, you know, I mean, that's not my role at all, but I am, talking to these people and kind of getting to know them and just saying, hey, if I hear of anybody looking for that office manager, what are you looking for, a specific office or anything like that? And that way, if I do, people are usually looking for people. So I'm kind of networking in that way as well, and just saying, hey, I'll keep your name, and if I hear someone looking for an office manager in the dental field or the legal field, I can pass your name along. And so I think ultimately it's still contacts and it's still ways to network. And so, if it's kind of one of those things, like from the early stages and the sales stage, it's like I just want someone to talk to me. So, when they reply to these messages, it's like I'm going to strike up a conversation, even if it's not about IT services. I'm just trying to say, hey, and then hopefully either I help them find a job, or they eventually find a job and they say, hey, I talked to this guy not so long ago that might get help with this. So, I think, we talked a lot about acquisition and thing, and I think one of the other things I saw a lot of, and this kind of just keyed me in on this because of what I just said. A lot of times, if a new manager comes in, something like that, a lot of times we find that they're used to working with someone, and you might lose the business over that, even if you were doing a great job, but they roll in there and they say, "Oh, I like this other company. I've worked with them for 10 years." And you're out and you're left going. And so we always tried to schedule a meeting anytime we heard a manager was changing or some kind of, upper leadership. We would always ask for a meeting. But a lot of times people say they're too busy for that stuff. And so that's always the hard part, right? Like the person you dealt with left the company, you now don't really have a great relationship with the new person. You're trying to build one, but they're not interested. And so that's another, you know, loss of business in some cases.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a classic right there. Yeah, well, you're seeing all the angles, man. You're seeing it. You're doing the right things. I love the activity towards the sales and marketing. That's great. Keep that 10, 15 hours up a month. If you can do more, do more. That's really good. That consistency will pay off for sure. Yeah, good for you. Well, anything else going on in your world in this first 90 days?
Not really. I mean, like I said, just as an entrepreneur, I'm taking kind of anything and everything I can work on right now. I've done hourly work. I've done some residential house calls. I can't say I'm proud of that because, coming out of the world I've been in, it's like it's not really the ideal client, but money's green, right? So, I'm helping people and you never know. Sometimes you help someone, a residential customer or whatever, and you find out they have a business and then they start asking you about other things. So right now, like I said, I'm doing subcontract work. It's kind of funny, I feel like I'm kind of reinventing myself and I not that I think that that's where I fit, but a lot of other companies have kind of brought me on as a subcontractor to do their server work and some of that stuff. And right now I'm willing to pretty much work
That's right.
around the clock to get it done. So I've been doing a lot of extra stuff for people and it's kind of been a good thing. It's filled my calendar and kept me busy so it's I still don't think it's what I want to do long term.
Right,
I
right.
really want to build the business for myself and, have my direct customers that I'm supporting. But, I think they also the people that I'm working with know that I'm trustworthy. I'm not going to steal their clients. That's not what I'm looking for. And, ultimately I'm a resource to help and I'm willing to help. I've got experience, I've done this and so I've been doing a lot of that and it's been interesting. I mean, it's like every week it seems like I'm working for someone else. And so I mean, literally the past 3 weeks I've worked for, three different people and just on, 3, 4 day projects each week for a company. And so it's been interesting. So it's keeping things, and that's part of what I've always loved about the MSP space is that every day is a little different. Even when you have the same tech stack and things like that, you know, a new issue arises all the time and you're like, "Oh, I didn't expect that." So every day's different. It's always something fresh, something new. There's always something new to the market coming. And so I think at least right now, I'm good. I'm happy. I'm liking what I'm doing. It's keeping me busy. That's I love to work. I love to mess with technology and just, be working around it. So like for me, there was a little bit of time early November where I really didn't have much going on and I was just like I was doubling down on marketing at that point, which I think was the right move. But like at the same time, I was like, man, I don't know if I can live like this. Like I literally don't have anything to do. And so it was nice once these other people are like, hey, I heard you're kind of back out on your own. And I was like, yeah. They're like, could you help me with some stuff? I was like, sure, I'd be glad to. And so I've been really happy, working on some of these other projects. It's been fun.
For you. Good for you. Well, keep fighting that fight. Your story reminds me a lot of a buddy of mine out in the southern Midwest, and we watched him for about, oh, I'd say 2 years. We brought him to do a lot of ConnectWise implementations, and I was just like, dude, like, go for it, but we could, you can make a lot of money just doing what you're doing for us, and whatnot. And he's like, no, I just can't, I can't, and we kind of fell out of communication for about a year. Just talked to him earlier this year, and he's closing on a $2 million. I was like, you were right, man, you did it. So it is this tough slog for quite a while, and then you start getting that rhythm, and just that little bit of success, like you're saying earlier, just kind of breeds more and more success. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man. And I'll tell you what, can we check in 90 more days?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Well, excellent. Chris, thanks for joining us today, and more to follow. Bye, everyone.